Hi, Anne-Marie.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm a little tired.
Why is that?
And I am ready for this race to be over. But she will not die.
I don't know. I think she's about dead. You know, I should say first, for our podcast listeners, well, A, I should say I think we're both referring to Hillary Clinton. And B, that you are, I learned from your answering machine, you're not Anna Marie Cox, you are Anna Marie Cox. Is that right?
That is correct. I am Anna.
Which would make you a member of the wine track, a Chablis-sipping elite, right?
I prefer a nice unoaked Chardonnay to a Chablis, but yeah, I am definitely within the demographic that's supposed to vote for Obama. At this point, I'm ready to vote for anyone who will make it end. But I actually wonder if that's not a motivation for a lot of people.
You think so?
Well, actually, I am totally joking. I feel very selfishly that I'd like the primaries to be over. But also, I have to say it's a pet peeve of mine, the constant calls for Hillary to drop out. Because clearly, you know, she's not a Huckabee figure here. She has almost half of the Democratic vote. And there are obviously people in the country that want very badly to vote for Hillary Clinton for president. And if she wants to continue going into debt and pursuing that dream, even though it looks like after tonight if it's possible for something to be even more mathematically impossible than it was before, it does look like her chances of getting a nomination are that.
Yeah, I think she pretty much is sunk. I mean, I should say that as we speak, we're looking at returns. He's been declared the winner in North Carolina, and it looks like by quite some margin. They haven't quite called Indiana, but it looks like she'll win it by a few.
I am actually literally looking, when you see the table of this, you'll see that I just glanced at the TV. It's 83% reporting with 4 points difference.
And the best she can hope for, it looks like, is that he won North Carolina by more than she won Indiana by, and especially given that North Carolina is a bigger state.
And his win in North Carolina, if this margin stays as close as it is in Indiana, his margin of victory in North Carolina will erase her popular vote victory in Pennsylvania and put him within, I think it's, you know, depending on how you count, like I think 40 delegates within, you know, sort of cinching the nomination.
Well, depending on how you count the superdelegates, you mean?
That's
yeah. I don't know. I avoid superdelegate counts because they all seem to disagree. I mean, the logic, an argument I've made repeatedly with Mickey Kaus is that, you know, if he wins in pledged delegates, he basically wins because I think, you know, superdelegates would in any case be pretty reluctant to take the trophy away from the person who won in pledged delegates. And I think, tell me if I'm crazy, but I think it's especially unlikely with a black candidate in the Democratic Party that superdelegates, that a bunch of mainly white superdelegates are going to take it away from him if he wins clearly in pledged delegates.
I'll say that, but I'll say that I sort of want to give the benefit of the doubt that they'd be reluctant to take it away from a female, from a woman.
I think normally they would. It's an interesting, you know, I think if he were a white male, she would have exactly the edge that I think he has by virtue of being black. I mean, I guess that's but if the
situations are reversed, I think she'd also have an edge there. I think that they're both in positions where kind of a traditional liberal Democrat would be reluctant to want to steal the vote away from them.
Right. Well, that's true. That's true. Yeah. I think. But so I just think.
But of course, then of course, I guess the question is it stealing? And also, I really hope. I mean, I know this is like going to be looking too far down the road, but I really hope that this cycle makes the Democrats reconsider the whole idea of superdelegates, which now I think everyone is coming to believe is as stupid an idea as the Electoral College, although we haven't gotten rid of that.
Yeah, I think maybe a compromise would be that superdelegates, there are superdelegates, but they aren't part of the vote count. In other words, you don't have to win a majority of pledged plus supers. If you win a majority of pledged, you win, period. But if there is no majority, but is only a plurality because, you know, several candidates stay in it, then they maybe would step in. That's a kind of a compromise. But yeah, it's Yeah,
and it imagines a future in which the parties would have a plurality by the time they got to the convention, which I would welcome. I mean, it'd be great if we actually had that kind of competition, I think, in our parties. But obviously that hasn't happened.
Yeah, no, I'm old enough to remember some real conventions when the outcome was in doubt, and it was good times. It was a lot of fun. But
Did you read about them on the teletype and on the wireless?
Yeah, well, this was we were. I would get up and read the cuneiform in the morning. But I think she's basically gone. And I'll tell you, I was looking at the betting markets. I don't know how much wisdom you attribute to those, but she began the day around with like about a 24% chance to win according to the markets, and he was like at around 74. She's down to like 12, 13. He's up to like 84, 85 at the moment, and I think
now she's really not going to win.
she's really, really, really not going to win. No, but see, I don't think it was quite. I think tonight, if she had won North Carolina, which actually seemed conceivable if you looked at the polls, because he has often underperformed relative to polls.
That's right.
So it looked conceivable that she could actually win both states. Now, if she had, that would have been a real conversation changer. But this just isn't.
That's what they were clearly hoping for. I mean,
yeah. I think now people are going to get up, in the morning and look at the numbers and go, "This is crazy." And I think you'll see a net movement of superdelegates to Obama, and it would not surprise me if she's actually out of the race in a week or 10 days.
I think it'll be a trickle of superdelegates. I don't think the superdelegates are going to get up tomorrow morning and make decisions that quickly. Maybe you're right about within 10 days, but I also think, and this is the thing that this is what I get angry at my fellow pundits. Her core support is really, really strong. She has a base of support that love her as much as everyone else hates her. And it's very strong within that group of people that's voting for her.
Now, this is mainly females, middle-aged and older, or what?
Well, actually, it's unclear. I mean, it's not that it's not that homogeneous a group. It's more it's younger, non-college educated women, and blue-collar women, and actually older women. Her age cohort and education cohort are not huge fans of hers, believe it or not. But she does very well with women kind of across the demographics that are not college educated and are kind of under $50,000 a year. But the people that like her, but what I want to emphasize is the people that are her supporters feel as passionately about her as what we see on TV about Obama's supporters feeling about him.
Mm-hmm.
And she's going to get the kind of donations that we saw after Pennsylvania again, I think. I think it's going to take a little while for that very hardcore, passionate group of people that really want to see a woman elected president to give up on her. And I think that really feeds her. I mean, already going into this, this is not a job that you try for and give up for easily, and she has an entire apparatus, that their entire careers hinge upon how she does here. And I just think that we've seen that apparatus slowly break down, that it's going to have to actually come to a grinding halt. And I know you wanted to talk about the Kentucky Derby, get shot on the field.
Yeah, no, I do. I was about to turn to the Kentucky Derby metaphor.
Before she gets out.
You think she will have to actually be euthanized before she will leave the race?
Well, I don't mean, obviously I do not mean literally. I think that her candidacy will have to become, objectively a cold, start. I guess not start. It'll have to be somehow objectively ruled out. Before she leaves. I don't think there's going to be a graceful bowing out here.
The doctors will have to come on the track and say, Hillary, both of your ankles are broken.
You have to leave now. Yes.
Now, I'll tell you, I am going to take the Kentucky Derby metaphor and use it to argue the opposite. That she's going to be out. She's going to
cross the finish line?
That she's going to be out in 10 days. And for those who haven't been paying attention to their metaphors lately, of course, in the Kentucky Derby, what happened was there was, as usually I guess is not the case, a female entry in the Kentucky Derby, a filly.
Very rare.
And the day before the Kentucky Derby, Hillary kind of identified herself with the filly and said, "Hey, put some money on the filly tomorrow." And then, you can't make these things up. What happened in real life is that the filly, 8 Bells, first of all, finished second. Okay.
It came a strong finish second. I mean, like, and really came up from behind.
Yeah.
This is unlike Hillary.
Yeah, ran a great race.
Ran a great race.
And finished second to a horse called Big Brown.
Who was a less experienced horse that some people said should not even be in the race.
Right. And then, of course, at the end, had broken both ankles, had to be euthanized. Now,
on the field. Literally put down where she fell.
The best race of her life killed her. Now,
right.
I mean, first of all, you know, they say that that some people say Hillary is genuinely religious. If I were religious and that happened, it would really get my attention, you know? Like, is God trying to tell me something? And I will tell you what I think, if you were to interpret that way, the kind of sense I think you would make of it. I mean, I think it's actually an exquisitely apt metaphor for the following reason. That, okay, already it's the case that if Obama gets the nomination and loses to McCain, an appreciable part of the Democratic Party will blame Hillary, and some of them will feel so intensely about it that they will never forgive her. So already her chances of being the presidential candidate in 4 years if Obama fails in the general this year are diminished, I think, by how long she has persisted. I think every week she stays in, that problem grows more severe. And if she stays in much longer, she has effectively ended her chances of ever running for president on the Democratic ticket. And that's the way I would flesh out the metaphor, is that it would kill her political career. And as if the metaphor weren't resonant enough, you know, the next big round of primaries includes Kentucky, right? I mean, next week is West Virginia, which has very few delegates, and which she will probably win overwhelmingly, and everybody expects that, so it won't mean anything. But then you have Kentucky and Oregon. I mean, if I were her, I would give serious thought to interpreting this metaphor as meaning, do not run in Kentucky. Get out before then.
Well, you know, I think, you have a point, and also, I mean, I've been, you know, this is a cycle where it has behooved almost anyone who's making predictions to say the opposite of whatever seems like the smart thing to say, because we've all been so wrong so much of the time. And when you get into this conversation, we really are kind of like peering into Hillary's psychology, because this race has been such an odd combination of historical accidents and unexpected coincidences and turns of events. You and I, like, I mean, it's really, we know what the math looks like, right? And the math looks really bad, but it's looked really bad for Hillary for a long time, and yet she stayed in it. And so, I mean, that's the only thing we have to go on in predicting her further moves.
Yeah, but it does look objectively worse. Again, it isn't.
Yeah, even worse. Yeah, now she really can't get the nomination.
Right, but I mean, no, but I mean, there was a hope. There was until tonight. There was the hope of the math actually being changed. I think. I mean, can you imagine the media storm tomorrow if she had won North Carolina? I mean, grave doubts about his viability would have swept across the American zeitgeist, and it would suddenly become quite conceivable that she could blow him away in Oregon or something. I mean, it really would have. You know, that could have possibly given her this epic momentum.
It would, although the math would still be the math still wouldn't work very well for her.
No, it would change the...
but it would change the thinking. You would say
it would change the thinking. I think, the delegate count would be closer in the end, right. and you can imagine the momentum shift being sufficient to really get the attention of superdelegates. I just think now, unless he... you know, commits a blunder that makes Bittergate look like a minor faux pas, there's just no way.
But I agree. I mean, I think we're agreed about it. There's hardly any chance of her getting the nomination. I just think that where we're sort of disagreeing is like how stubborn she's going to be about getting across the finish line.
Well, I think the Clintons are not crazy. I think they're not crazy, and I have
seen nothing to suggest that they're not crazy.
Have I seen anything to suggest that they're not crazy?
I have seen evidence to suggest that they are crazy.
Well, what evidence have you seen to suggest that they actually are crazy?
I shouldn't say that staying in has been crazy, because I mean, as I said before, like she does have this enormous block of voters that really want to vote for her, and she's been counting on that block of voters to sort of burst through in some way. But I think a lot of the decisions that they've made, maybe I shouldn't say crazy, but I would say that what was supposed to be the political genius of the Clintons has really turned out to be a mirage. both Bill and Hillary. I mean, he's made these enormous errors in speaking and in his arguments. And it turns out the entire campaign was premised on wishful thinking in terms of how the primaries were going to play out. As you know, they didn't even have plans for any states after Super Tuesday. I mean, it took them a while to even set up offices in some of these later states. They really did not have a good ground game sort of going in beyond the story of her inevitability. And so I think that, the idea that to the extent to which, people say that, they're brilliant political minds and brilliant political tacticians, I think that that's been largely disproved. And instead, they seem to be going along by gut instinct. And that gut instinct has not necessarily led them in the right direction. And I think she's still going forward on gut instinct. You could be right. I mean, I don't want to... I guess my only argument is that I think we have seen nothing in this race that makes me think that she will do the logical thing.
Yeah, but, don't you think the seeming incoherence of the campaign can be attributed somewhat to this battling between the Bill faction and the Hillary faction? So that there was no single mind in charge for the whole time? I
agree, and who's to say that incoherence won't continue? I mean, there's just no signal to me that I think the first signal we'll see to coherence in the Hillary campaign is when she drops out. That will be the first time that we see the campaign all agreeing on something.
Okay, but there's a difference between incompetence and craziness. Even if I grant you that we've seen incompetence, the reason I would say it wasn't crazy is, look, if you look at these betting markets where smart people put real money on the line, they were before tonight giving her a 24% chance of winning. Well, no sane person who's invested as much as she has and actually has a 24% chance, if that was anything like true, would feel like dropping out. So I've never thought it was quite crazy until tonight. Even back when the markets were saying 12%, I was saying, well, it would be hard to drop out at 12%. But now I think the markets at this moment have her chances at 12, 13%. I think that's way high. That is way high. I think her chances are 2%, and she is sabotaging future political prospects by persisting, even conceivably including her place in the Senate. I don't know. I don't know New York politics at all, but I got to believe there's some diehard Obama fans in New York, and if she is held responsible for his losing the general this year, conceivably, I don't know, it could come back to haunt her at the state level.
It could. I think another thing that's happened in this cycle is that because it's been going on for so long, I think there's a certain kind of tunnel vision that's happened, quite frankly, with all three campaigns that are continuing right now. That there isn't a lot of thought to legacy. There isn't a lot of thought to what's going to happen in their respective Senate careers, once the campaign is over. I think that I think that for different reasons, all three candidates are going for broke. And I think that is sort of led to some of the recklessness we see on the Democratic side, although more in Hillary's part than Obama's part. Although Obama has had a certain amount of recklessness as well.
Well, what part would you call recklessness as opposed to incompetence? He's definitely had some incompetence.
Let's. I think that maybe incompetence can come from being overconfident. Let's say that. Let's say that I have history on my side. We're rolling ahead. I can. I don't see how I could screw this up, and then he does things that could screw it up. I'm trying to think if there is one thing I wanted to talk to you about before we go. I hope that we can go soon because I'm really tired. But that is the Rush Limbaugh effect. And
you mean in Texas and?
No, in Indiana. That's what they're talking about tonight, about whether or not he would have won if it weren't for Rush Limbaugh. And I know that that's something that the Obama campaign is at least whispering in reporters' ears. And I'll ask you what you think of this so-called Operation Chaos, and then I guess I'll tell you what I think about it. But
well, you mean the attempt his attempt beginning in Texas to perpetuate the race?
That's right.
I don't know. I guess it's smart from his point of view, and I think it was somewhat effective in Texas. What's your take on it?
Well, I guess I would put more stock in it if the polls coming out of Indiana showed any kind of marked difference from the polls that were coming up to Election Day. Mm-hmm. It is, it's just really hard to say. I think what's interesting about it is that it is such a sign of the craziness of this cycle that it can even be conceivable, that someone like Rush Limbaugh would have such a huge disproportionate effect on the Democratic primary. I mean, the obvious argument against him is that if he had such a huge effect on the Democratic primary, how come he couldn't get Mitt Romney elected? I mean, there's not a lot to believe in there. I just think that, but I do think that something that's coming out of all of this is, the growing suspicion. I mean, there's a reason why I think people are looking to things like betting markets and not to polls. I mean, I think that we have really lost trust in the ability of of people to know each other's minds. I think, if that makes any sense at all, to trust that the things that happen in our public sphere are actually a reflection of true public will.
So So you mean that makes us believe in forces like Operation Chaos or whatever it's called?
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Huh.
I mean, I think it's like the folklore. It's like folklore. Like wanting to believe in sort of a power that, well, as Obama might say, a power greater than ourselves.
That's what I'm taking away from the Kentucky Derby, of course.
That's a good point.
Isn't it also true that just the polls are objectively less reliable than before?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't actually seen a good study to suggest why that is. I do think it's interesting that the exit polls have tended to be fairly off throughout, the primaries, and yet, again and again, you see news organizations looking at the exit polling, post-election day to suss out things like, religious preference, race, income, and that kind of thing. And I do wonder why we allow ourselves to believe that the exit polls are correct on that front when they've proven to be so inaccurate on the simple task of predicting who's going to win.
Yeah.
But I don't have an answer as to what we should do instead of that. So, and unless you could create a betting pool where people would also identify by race and gender and whatnot.
Now, assuming Obama is the guy, do you have a prediction about the general?
Nope.
Not at all. And do you deny Glenn Greenwald's allegation that you're among the journalists who has fallen prey to the McCain journalist brainwashing technique?
It depends on how you define, I guess, McCain journalist brainwashing technique. I feel like I've suffered for not denying that I like the guy. And that I don't think I'd vote for him. And I disagree with him on a lot of things, but of the people I've met in Washington who I've had a chance to talk to for hours and hours and hours, he's someone who I would want to talk to again, and whose company I find interesting, and who I think, I find to be generally, respectable, dignified, fairly straightforward guy. And that's not something I can say about a lot of the people that I've met in Washington, politicians and journalists included. So, and if that makes it more likely to give him a second chance to explain himself, I think that it would be dishonest of me to deny that I might give him, more of a chance to explain himself than I would to someone who had treated me, who had either come across as an idiot or given me no reason to expect them to be able to explain themselves better beyond, the gaffe they just made.
Well, if Obama doesn't get better at courting the press, that could be the difference in the general, I think.
I think that is what the McCain people are counting on, quite honestly.
It's shocking that Obama has not gotten better at that. He should be a natural.
He is, and I do think, this is something that I've said whenever discussions of McCain's sort of courting of the press comes up. I think that with McCain, it's not that he's such a great charismatic guy. It is actually just the simple fact of access that makes people give him that second chance. Mm-hmm. He is also likable on top of that, I would say. But I think that if Hillary or Obama, if they had that kind of access, they would get that same kind of treatment. Because, again, it's just a factor of, if you and I have a long conversation, and in the course of that long conversation you say one thing that I find disturbing, well, I'm going to look at that in the context of our long conversation.
Have I said one thing that you found disturbing, by the way?
You've said so many more than I can count.
Okay, sorry. That's not the real me.
But you know what I'm saying? The thing, it's just a sort of a law of averages. If you spend a lot of time with someone, you take the one mistake they make against the great quantity of things they said that made sense to you. And Obama and Hillary do not give, most politicians do not give reporters a chance to do that.
It's true, and it's funny because I think both Obama and McCain have something that makes people really want to kind of be their friend. I mean, McCain is a war hero. He was a POW. He's been tortured. He's a man's man and so on. And Obama is like this cool black guy, you know? I mean,
he's the black guy you can take home to your parents.
What's that?
He's a black guy you can take home.
Exactly. He's the best of both worlds. You can play hoops with him, then you can take him home to meet the parents.
Right.
And, you know, if I understand the average journalist, they want to be his friend just as they want to be McCain's friend, and he's just not exploiting that, and it's a little mysterious.
And I think that's what's interesting is sort of you see opposite dynamics with the traveling press corps with McCain and with Obama. McCain's traveling press corps, I think, tend to like him very much and are appreciative of that time that he spends with them. And even though the access is not as good as it used to be, there's a great deal of effort put into making journalists, you know, sort of a part of the process. And his staff, you know, loves to hang out with journalists. And so there's just sort of an aura of access. And people who don't travel with McCain tend to be more skeptical about McCain and tend to like sort of hold him, you know, be more cynical about his relationship with the press, for instance. Whereas, from what I know from the Obama campaign, the people who travel with Obama, the journalists that travel with him, are sick of it. You know, they want availability in 10 days. You know, can I eat my waffle? Like, they're annoyed with him, and they tend to cover him quite skeptically.
It's so fixable. And all they're asking for is, like, off-the-record sessions, right? It's not like he'd be risking, you know, a faux pas or anything, right?
Or you know, what they call availabilities, where you just, like, show up for, like, 5 minutes after a speech.
And is that, but do they, I mean, and is it generally the norm? I mean, I've never done this, and you've done a lot of it, but is it the norm that these things are on the record, so it actually is a chance to screw up?
It is a chance to screw up, but I mean, again, I would point to McCain. He's on the record all the time too. But just the more time you have on the record. I mean, I know that it may seem counterintuitive to most political consultants, I guess, but I think that for journalists, it's just a case of like, what are the quotes I have to choose from here? You know, like, I mean, am I going to use the gotcha quote when I have like other things that make sense to use? You know, I mean, I guess the relationship between the press and politicians has you know, evolved to the point where using the gotcha quote is what is rewarded on the part of journalists.
Now I see what you meant a little more clearly, yes, about how if you've had a long conversation, there's more basis for forgiveness. And
for actually trying to communicate what the person was trying to say.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I feel like if I've had a long conversation with you and I have a good idea of like where you're really coming from and what you're trying to say, and then in the course of that long conversation you say something that seems hypocritical or seems to go against what you said what you had appeared to be saying in 99% of the conversation, it would be irresponsible for me as a journalist to pick out that one thing.
Right. But of course, if the cameras are rolling, none of this really matters, right? If it's all going to wind up on YouTube, it can be used however the most inimical person out there wants to use it.
That's true, and although I also think in the age of YouTube, you do also get you know, people who are really serious about this, you know, can also show context. I mean, if you're a serious consumer of news or a serious journalist, like you would, if something is taken out of context, it's part of your job as a journalist to put it in context.
Yeah.
You know, that's sort of something that's been going on in this fight with, like, actually, I think, I mean, some people might get upset about this analogy, but like Obama's bitterness comment and McCain's 100 Years War comment, they both like have an apparent meaning that I think is kind of inarguable, but they are both set. They have context around them that make them not so bad as they sound, if that makes sense.
I think that's I think that's somewhat true in both cases.
But you know, it's the role of journalists to kind of like be like, well, okay, yes, this is what the person said, but these are the things around what that person said. You know, so you, the consumer of news and the voter, can decide for yourself if you think that what this person said was something that offends you.
Yeah.
You know, for whatever reason. Anyway, I mean, I think it's sort of like obvious to its face that like more access is good for democracy.
But am I right in thinking that even if it was wandering to the back of the plane and giving reporters an off-the-record session, that would do something to endear them to him?
Yes, of course it would.
And he does not. Obama does not do that much, right?
From what I gather, he used to do it every once in a while, and now does it even more rarely. And
this is just nuts. It's nuts.
I agree.
And it's so fixable.
Look at the calculation on his campaign's part, though. He's getting great coverage without doing it.
Wait, I didn't hear that on his what?
He's getting terrific coverage without going to the back of the plane.
I guess so, but he's found himself in some situations where he really needed some sympathy from journalists. I mean, I can understand how he's worried about spontaneous on-the-record sessions given things like Bittergate.
But you know, the thing about Bittergate, as you're calling it, was actually in a situation where he had no reason to think that he would be recorded.
Yeah, no, he actually thought. Yeah,
he thought he was off the record. Yeah. So
he should have realized that even in a situation like that today, you can wind up on YouTube, but he didn't. I think you're right.
Yeah.
But
so, I think that he did. I just think I think it's sort of a gimme that more access is better access. Oh, I'm looking over 86% in. No, wait, hold on. I'm just going to see if I can give us... Indiana, 85% in, still 4 points.
Yeah, so it looks like she does squeeze by in Indiana. He wins big in North Carolina, and I think the party's over, basically. Well, thanks for staying up for it, because you just flew in from, Florida or something, right?
From Florida.
It's been a long day for you, and I actually just came up from Washington. Were you doing reporting in Florida?
I was at a Pew conference on religion and public.
Oh, right. You did a little blogging from that.
Yeah.
On your Swampland blog at time.com.
Yes, Swampland, time.com/Swampland.
And do you have any fresh insights from that you haven't yet blogged? No religion insight scoops for us?
No religious insight scoops. But I guess actually the one thing that I would say that the takeaway one of the things I found most interesting is a professor named Michael Lindsay gave a presentation on what he called the new face of evangelical Christians in America. Mm-hmm. And he's seeing sort of almost a class breakdown happening among evangelicals, where there's what he calls populist evangelicals and cosmopolitan evangelicals. And the cosmopolitan evangelicals hold the same kind of cultural values as your shabbily Democrats. You know,
and they vote Democrat?
No, they don't.
They don't.
They don't. That's sort of I don't know what this means for politics, except that it is a kind of breaking down of the evangelical coalition, though. They don't operate in the same ways. These two groups are not going to be able to be